I was excited to read the Kenobi novel for two reasons. One, I figured Legends couldn't have made a story as bad as the Obi-Wan TV show, and second, because I enjoy the work of John Jackson Miller. I already looked at his novels The Living Force and Batman Resurrection on this channel, and I think Kenobi continues that tradition of slow but intriguing lore novels, with the story of this one, I feel, being a lot more realistic in the way it portrayed the months and years following Obi-Wan's exile to Tatooine to watch over young Luke Skywalker as he grows into the galaxy's last hope. Now, coincidentally, the Obi-Wan show from Disney Plus will be my next video. Literally just kind of shook out that way, so I'm kind of excited to compare and contrast these two very different looks at Obi-Wan's time on Tatooine. John Jackson Miller conceptualized this book as a Western romance starring Obi-Wan, freshly stripped from the only life he ever knew, starting development on the novel in 2006 and gradually building on the concept till he released the book in 2013, towards the end of the original Star Wars continuity before Disney's sweeping reboot. At the time of its conception, Miller was actually more of a comic writer than a novelist, originally proposing this to Dark Horse Comics' editorial staff around this time, but the book was shelved. This added to the fact that Miller was focused on an adaptation of another Lucasfilm property at this time, adapting Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, also fearing that George Lucas may contradict the book with his upcoming, though eventually cancelled, Star Wars Underworld show. And when George Lucas had a project coming up, secondary media like novels and comics kept as far away from that as possible, since George would gladly run over anything other people did, as was his right, being the franchise's creator. But the whole point of the extended universe was to be cohesive with George Lucas's main work, so they yielded to the unlikely but possible contradictions this novel could have due to Lucas's show. Though following the 2012 Disney acquisition, Underworld was canceled, and with Disney's exact intentions for the franchise brewing, they figured they may as well put the novel together as one of the final Legends novels. Kenobi takes place in 19 BBY, weeks after the events of Revenge of the Sith, and follows an Obi-Wan still reeling from the events that transpired, with his apprentice turning to the dark side. On top of that, his mission to protect Luke isn't going as planned, with Owen Lars incredibly protective of Luke and not wanting Obi-Wan around. All this while the in-hiding Obi-Wan is totally isolated, with him trying and failing to communicate with his fallen master Qui-Gon Jinn. This is when he has a chance encounter with a girl, Callie, who is rebellious and is almost hurt, but is saved by Obi-Wan, who, after saving her, meets her mother, Annalene, or Annie, as her friends call her, who invites Obi-Wan, who, at this point on the fly, cooks up the alias Ben to her store, Danner's Claim, and ends up heading with them to the store and learns much about the Pika Oasis, a small town more or less. He also learns of Oren Galt, a divorced friend of Annie's who lost a son to the Tuscans. As he also learns Ganner, Annalee's husband, died at the hands of these same Tuscans. Oren runs a Tuscan Defense Task Force. He has the town pay him for that, and it is supposedly a non-profit that is designed to stop what happened to Dannar or Oren's son from ever occurring again. Days later, Annalene's kids, Jabe and Callie, leave with Oren and his two surviving children, Mullen and Vika. Obi and Annie bond during this time, Annie reading him as an antisocial man who must be running something weird. These thoughts are interrupted as her son returns home drunk with Oren and his kids. Annie's pissed, but that doesn't last long as the Tuscan raiders, noticing the settlers are out of town, come to attack Dannar's Claim. The settlers are caught off guard, but Obi-Wan intervenes. This, however, leads to Oren creating a counterattack on the Tuscans, taking the town along with Jabe, Annalene's son, to slaughter the offending Tuscans. The Tuscan raiders, including the leader Plug-Eye, managed to escape the slaughter and meet Obi-Wan and Annie, who were watching the fight, both concerned about Jabe, who they fear is being goaded into going too far in his revenge killings on the Tuscans. As it turns out, though, Obi-Wan isn't the first Jedi to have met them, with Sherard Het having previously worked with the Tuscans. He ends up having a son who is also Force-sensitive, Ashard Het, who seemingly also died, though he actually became Darth Krayt from the Star Wars Legacy comics. It's weird and not super relevant to this book, just further connection, as the Tuscans have a legend that another Jedi would come and be of consequence, clearly seeing the Tuscans had a bigger role in the galaxy than just as tribes of marauders. Anyhow, soon Oren tells Annalene to enjoy herself and her family in Mos Eisley with him watching the store. As they're headed there, they bump into Ben, who is fixing a water vaporator. He hitches a ride reluctantly with them. There they have a nice time, but eventually notice Oren is in town. Obi follows him and finds out that Oren is over his head taking Hutt money to pay for his farm and failing businesses. Oren is saved from the Hutts by Obi-Wan and asks Annalene to marry him, with Annalene feels kind of obligated to but also doesn't want to and says she needs to think on it. Oren and his kids head off, taking Jabe home with them, while Callie drives home in the old speeder and Annalene takes Ben home. Though after dropping Ben off, Annalene finds Jabe has yet to return. Jabe ends up on a raid on Albrecht, who is holding out on the Tusken Defense Fund. This goes south as Obi-Wan shows up to observe and the Tuskens attack and capture Jabe, though in his hustle to flee, Oren believes Jabe has died. He goes to Annalene, who he asks again to marry him, but she declines again, then says the Hutts killed Jabe. This may have worked, but Obi-Wan returns with the boy after bargaining with the Tuskens, telling them Oren would see justice by his hand if she gave him the boy back. With Jabe now back, Annalene tells Oren to leave, who reminds her that the boy is in it as deep as him, and as a result, the whole of Danner's claim as well. Before leaving, deciding to lead a mob to confront Ben and kill him, and blame everything on him, saying the Tuskens were in an alliance with the reclusive Jedi. The mob comes, but Obi-Wan starts fucking with the settlers, making Oren look foolish as his deceptions start coming out. It is his word versus Oren's, though, and the town isn't buying it, despite growing suspicion. That is when the Hutts show up. Turns out Annalene called to have Oren pay up, leaving him in a hard position since he doesn't have money, and the settlers' fund is almost broke. The Hutts fight the town folks as Oren runs with his kids, but the kids are confronted by Tuskens and Mullen is killed. Oren, however, is dealing with Obi-Wan, who has him cornered when a crate dragon shows up. Obi-Wan kills it, but reveals to Oren he's a Jedi, the crazed man saying he's going to snitch the Empire, which will hopefully get him off the planet, and they'll be solid. He runs, but is seemingly killed by Tuskens as the Hutts flee, not wanting to fight some random town. The town is again at peace, but not buying Annalene wasn't involved. So Obi-Wan gets Annalene and her family hooked up on Alderaan, and she wants Obi-Wan to come with him since she's fallen in love with him, but he says he'll never be able to tell her the truth as his mission's too important. And since Oren also lied to her, she just couldn't take it. She leaves with the kids, though as she jumps into hyperspace, she thinks of Ben and knows that she served her time on Tatooine and hopes whatever the strange man needed will one day come his way and that everything would work out for him. Soon the book cuts to Oren waking up, thinking he has been saved, only to realize he's been turned into a Tusken by Plug-Eye, who sealed his mouth and put him in Tusken gear, forcing the man to work on their stolen vaporator for water. A fate to the prejudiced Oren worse than death. The book ends on Obi-Wan again talking with Qui-Gon about what he's done, and that he's proud to have helped the town despite things not always going as planned, and saying that he's still watching Luke and accepting his new fate as a recluse. Obi-Wan is in an interesting spot in this book. He wants to hide and keep a low profile and stay focused on his mission, knowing that if he doesn't ruffle too many feathers, he and Luke would be safe, especially since in Legends, the Emperor didn't really care about Obi-Wan or any of the other Jedi that hadn't been confirmed dead. He fractured the Order and took the power. If anything, survivors and their misery strengthened his link to the dark side. Obi-Wan was really sad in this book. As he sees the Republic fall to the Empire in real time, he starts hearing of Darth Vader, this Imperial warlord, knowing that Anakin took on the name and realizing shit's getting rocky out here. On top of that, his old clone allies and human troops are taking on new stormtrooper outfits. He is watching the universe die in front of his eyes. He also publicly strips his name, going by Ben, something he makes up quickly on a whim since it seemed relatively common to the natives out here. All Obi-Wan had to do was keep his head down. He knew this and he tried to follow these instructions, though upon coming to Tatooine, Obi-Wan starts frequenting the Pico Oasis, and more specifically, its general store, which along with the rest of the small region is running into issues with the Tusken Raiders, and while he resists the temptation at first, he eventually grows close to the owner of Danner's claim, Annalene, a widow who's kind of a mother to everyone in the area. This blossoms into a near romance, but the core thing is that Obi-Wan won't let these people suffer, and frankly, he loses a lot of subtlety he should really have as a Jedi Knight who is technically a wanted man. Obi-Wan imagines his life with Annalene, but ultimately realizes Luke being the last hope for the galaxy, and he being his guardian angel puts him in a role far more important and much bigger than him and his desires, causing the Jedi to break it off and let this potential love go. Another subplot is Obi-Wan trying to reach Qui-Gon Jinn through the Force, which takes him a while, and this only adds to his frustration and feeling of isolation that kind of draws him to Annalene and also draws him into trouble with the Tuskens, Hutts, and the other trouble that heads to this stretch of desert throughout the novel. Annalene is the owner of Danner's Claim, a store founded by her deceased husband. Danner, a man who put a lot into this store, and though she won't admit it, she is starting to sort of grow tired of this life, and while Danner is gone, his best friend is around to support Annalene, Oren, who has been up to shady deals and turns out to be kind of a shitty guy. She has her 2 kids, Caleb and Nella, who she wants the best for, though she isn't sure Tatooine is the best place for him, especially since Caleb is a kid that seems uninterested in this life and is hanging around with Oren as he gets shady with his business dealings, with some great scenes of her kind of grieving as her son goes missing during his conflict with the Tuskens. Though eventually, Oren and his business puts her store and her city in danger. By the end of the novel, Annalene loves Obi-Wan, but Obi-Wan can't go with her when she's run out of town due to Oren's actions, and it hurts her that he can't explain it, wondering if she misread him, and feeling like she's been lied to the same way Oren had to her pretty thoroughly, though eventually realizing Obi-Wan has something going on and is a good man despite fears at first that she may have been misled. At one point, Oren tries to marry her as an excuse to get money off her successful store, stemming largely from his bad business dealings, rendering him broke, and she's pretty sickened by this, but isn't 100% sure why. For a minute, she feels obligated to do this, but eventually realizes that something's not right with Oren, something she had been kind of sensing since he started this new task force to attack the Tusken Raiders. Oren has lost himself and become a crook in this book. He was close with Danner and eventually after his death, his wife Annalene, but he eventually gets hardened and greedy. He starts a defense force from Tusken Raiders, taking protection money, not by force or threat, by ensuring he could protect the town from Tuskens with the right gear. In actuality, he and his children are faking Tusken attacks, then assaulting Tuskens and stirring up trouble that wasn't actually there, as Oren uses the money largely to subsidize his moisture farming business. He encourages the kid of the town to kill Tuskens, pulling in and endangering them to help himself push his plans. This eventually climaxes and leads to the death of his son Mullen. At the end of the book, the town learns of these embezzlements and his fake raids on the Tuskens that were dangerous and pointless and led to many deaths. And while it ruins him, it also brings Annalene down, since they think, due to their closeness, she must have been in on it and not a victim of the same scams they were. Though Obi-Wan calls in a favor with Bail Organa to get her a spot in the University of Alderaan, Oren gets his comeuppance for all he did to the Tuskens by the end of the book, with the Tuskens taking him, torturing him, and making him one of them. A great fear from a man who saw them as savages, and the prose in this scene where he's confused and Oren is forced to become a Tusken is super well written, interesting, and frankly a satisfying end to this character who slowly turns out to be this horrible, corrupt villain, ruining the lives of good people and getting many people killed through his arrogance. Finally, we have Plug-Eye, a local Tusken that everyone fears. She's a warrior of legend. She sends her kids into combat, and on that level she relates to Annalene and Oren, though knowing that she and her people were treated unfairly, ends up attacking the town occasionally. Oh yeah, and the macro lore shit, she's the aunt of Ashad Het, a former adopted Tusken turned Jedi turned immortal Sith Lord who is the main villain of the Star Wars Legacy comics known as Darth Krayt. Pretty cool, I guess. That's a big accolade for a local Tusken Raider. She shows some mercy to Annalene and her kids, even though she puts Orin through a terrible, terrible punishment at the end of the book for his transgressions against the Tuskens. This book is pretty slow and relaxed, though things like the Tusken raids get pretty intense. It's mostly a character study of Obi-Wan, who is in a new environment with the only family he knew, the Jedi, all dead, with only a handful of survivors spread in disarray, and little to do but wait for this boy Luke Skywalker to grow into the great Jedi that can hopefully come back and fight off his father and the Emperor, which of course is all theoretical at this point. Obi-Wan has a newfound solitary life, and that makes the book a little depressing at times. Annalene is sort of the exact opposite of Obi-Wan. She never had anything but a lonely life on Tatooine and really wants to see more. I actually like Obi-Wan and Annalene's romance thing. They work together well, and seeing Obi-Wan kind of lumber through this romance and a woman growing love for him is odd, since up to a few weeks ago he was a celibate space monk that wasn't allowed to even consider romance. The book is slow, but not in a bad way. The characters are so strong, and the drama between Annalene and Orin injects some much needed drama as Obi-Wan sits around depressed trying to find himself. It's a unique tone, and it definitely has those old lone gunman western movies, which was a clear inspiration, films like True Grit or something. People always talk about how Obi-Wan aged like shit. I mean, Ewan McGregor was 32 during the filming of Revenge of the Sith. Alec Guinness was 62, meaning Obi-Wan aged 30 years between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, at least as far as actors were concerned. And people often complain, like, how did you go from 30 to 60? And, first off, shit sneaks up on you. We're all dying. No, but this novel explains that Obi-Wan being exposed to the elements aged him much quicker than his life in the temple did. This was also intentional to make IDing him harder, assuming Vader or someone else from the Empire did start poking around Tatooine looking for him. John Jackson Miller loves interjecting lots of lore. We saw this in other novels too, especially in The Living Force, and Batman Resurrection had some too. It 100% pulls through here as well. He likes to explain things that were unexplained and people always had questions about, and I think I appreciate that about his novels. They really tie in well to the movies. I also think that's why a lot of this book works so well. You can tell this man is living his childhood dream writing these stories for these franchises that mean a lot to him. So he takes time to explain stuff that casual fans may not care about enough in the movies, but super fans get a kick about getting an explanation for. Also, I don't think casual fans are often the ones reading dozens of books about Star Wars, so I think he found the right niche in Star Wars to really flesh out some of these movie moments. One thing I think was tough about the show, and we're reviewing that next and it'll be out soon, but a big problem with that show is the overuse of Inquisitors, Darth Vader, Baby Leia. I mean, Reva literally went to Dilar's homestead. The show is so outlandish and requires massive ass pulls to accommodate a ton of fan service, and it's really just more about the fan service than Obi-Wan's story. I think this arc of Obi-Wan, or Ben dropping his old life to protect a new one, is super cool and the most sensical arc Obi-Wan can have. I think the Obi-Wan story more or less ends with his duel on Mustafar until Luke finally comes to his homestead during A New Hope to fulfill his destiny. I'm cool with little side stories and sometimes they're refreshing, but I'm glad they kept it pretty chill despite serious moments and lots of emotional turmoil. Also, Tuskens are everywhere here, and I like how this book shows, Tuskens are a brutal group, but also so are some of the humans hunting them. Like the search party led by Orin were killing more or less for fun, reveled in it, went on hunts, stole spoils from the Tuskens. At that point, the question the book proposes is, how is that much different from what the Tusken Raiders do? can't really call them savages if you're being equally so. I find that a fascinating idea. It's also something the Phantom Menace novel, as well as the Attack of the Clone novels, similarly show lots of interesting, tragic things tied to the Tatooine natives, and I think it's worth looking into since I think the books have done a good job to flush out this faction in Star Wars. Oh, also, Obi-Wan fights a crate dragon, which was honestly incredible. The crate dragon is so cool. I love these things. Honestly, I thought this was a great Jedi Western novel. It's just perfect for a guy like me. I'll never complain about a John Wayne-style Western with Obi-Wan in place of our gunslinger. Like, was this Obi-Wan or Big Jake? I really can't tell the difference. No, but this is a great Obi-Wan story. I get why Disney Plus did what they did, but this makes way more sense from a story perspective. It's just simple. It's a story about a sad man reflecting on his destroyed life and trying to move forward when he has a very uncertain future. I think this has to be in my top 5 Star Wars novels so far, and while it's a tad bit slower than some of the novels, it's got such a rich story that feels so necessary for Obi-Wan fans. Anyhow, we're looking at the Obi-Wan Kenobi show next, which is often also just shortened to Kenobi, so we're going to compare that to this. If you want to see that and many more Star Wars videos, check out my playlist that shows up on the screen right